welcome to the video. Today we are talking about one of my favorite books that I read last year, which was Spin of Fate by A.A.Vora, but we are talking about it with the author. I have never done an author interview on this channel in the entire time that I've been doing this, so I'm very excited that this is my first. I wanted to have A.A.Vora on, and my friend Lou offered. You know Lou from Lou Reading Things, she offered, and so we had a really great conversation about the book. So I'm excited to get into that. I wanted to tell you a couple of things. First, if you don't know, here's what the book is about.
The synopsis says, Aina's world is governed by tyrannic law, a force that segregates people into upper and lower realms. It's said that if the sinful lowers commit themselves to kindness and charity, their souls will lighten, allowing them into the peaceful upper realms. But Aina, one of the few lowers to ever ascend, just wants to go back home. Aina is desperate to reunite with her mother, hoping she's survived the beast and the wars of her homeland alone. After failing to weigh down her soul with petty crimes, Aina joins a rebel group defying the authorities and bringing aid to those condemned to a life of suffering in the lower realms. Alongside Aina are two new recruits, Maison, a ruthless fighter trying to save his clan from extinction, and Aranel, a spoiled noble spying for the powers that be. Before long, the rebels find themselves in the middle of a brewing war. On one side, a violent king of a lower realm is bent on destroying tyrannic law. On the other, the authorities of the upper realms will do anything to stay on top. Now the young rebels must face both sides head on if they want to stop a conflict that could not only break tyrannic law, but the universe itself. It is very well written. It is incredibly intentional in how it was thought out and then put into the book and edited. The author did exactly what she set out to do in creating a story inspired by both her Indian heritage and her Japanese heritage, and it dives into a lot of discussion that is done in a way that I feel is very well done around the theme of using religion to control others and religious authorities' exacerbation of the issue of classism. It's got three very different, very well cultivated main characters who have unique relationships with the world that they inhabit and the religion and the classist structure that is exacerbated by the religion, and it has one of the most unique settings I've ever seen, where we have four interconnected realms that people inhabit based on allegedly how good or bad their souls are. And your soul is something that you can physically see because it is present on your forehead. Which direction it spins determines which realm you're eligible to live in. If you are in the lower realms, you live in danger, and your hope is to lighten your soul through good deeds enough to ascend. But not everything is as it seems, and there's both a resistance group trying to aid the lower realms and a council of higher realm folks in power trying to maintain that power. And there's also a king in the lower realms who is trying to break down the barriers between realms. And all of these groups are clashing, and caught in the middle of this are our three main characters, Aina, Aranel, and Maison, who all end up working with the resistance for various reasons. Aina had ascended to a better realm from a lower realm, but wants to go back home to her mother, who gave her a lot of mommy issues. Aranel has been sent by the higher council to spy on the resistance in the hopes that doing this means that he can ascend to the highest realm and be with his family in Paramos. And Maison, who's from one of the lower realms, just wants to reunite with his clan and do right by his clan because that's where he finds his value in, is being with his people. And this is also a book with a hard magic system as opposed to soft. The magic, the realms, and the religion, these are all very intricately woven together and interconnected. This is a book where you see that the author was so intentional in their design of this story.
And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that if you did not already know, Cindy from With Cindy hosts the Asian Readathon every single year, and this is one of the books that she talked about.
Another book that I want to shout out, and this one is actually coming out in May. This is going to be for the third prompt, which is an underrated book, and that is Spin of Fate by A.A.Vora, who is an Indian-Japanese author living in Tokyo, and that's going to be relevant to why I think it's underrated. So basically, this book is pitched as Avatar meets Naruto, and it's a high fantasy debut. It has a scientific hard magic system that's also loosely inspired by the law of karma. So this takes place in a world that's governed by tyrannic law, which is basically this ancient magical force that segregates people into upper and lower realms based on their morality. This is basically what Twitter wishes they could be. How it works is that basically people in the lower realm who are more sinful, if they commit themselves to kindness, then their souls will lighten and it will allow them into the upper realms. The main character is one of the few lowers who actually got to ascend into the higher realm, but she wants to go back to reunite with her mom, who's trapped down there. So as a result, she joins a group of rebels called the Balancers, and they believe in helping people who have been condemned to a life of suffering. Like, they don't believe that this law or this rule should be a thing. The premise of this sounds super interesting, and I already have a couple ideas for why this kind of world where like you're segregating people by their morality is problematic, and I'm very curious curious if the author has similar ideas to like what I'm thinking of, or if they're gonna surprise me and show other things that I hadn't considered before. I think it's underrated is because I haven't heard anything about it. Like I haven't seen people talk about it. Usually if a book is coming out, you would see that like the author is doing book tours, but I think the reason why there hasn't been like a tour going on is because the author lives in Japan. So I think it's really hard for non-American authors to be under the spotlight as much as like American authors that are obviously usually at the forefront of publishing. This definitely seems like a very underrated book that needs more attention.
That fits some of the prompts. So if you are participating in Asian Readathon, this is a book that you could read. It does come out next month in May during Asian Readathon, so it's sort of perfect timing to read it. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that if you are going to BookNet Fest in May, also next month at the end of May, May 24th and 25th, I will be there and I have several copies of Spin of Fate that I can be handing out. So I have copies, so if you are going to BookNet Fest and you would like a copy, they will be there. So I am hoping to see some of you there. Links are down below for BookNet Fest. It is in Orlando, Florida, May 24th and 25th. I believe this is the last year it's going to be in Florida, so if you are here in Florida or anywhere nearby and you wanted to go, try to get there this year. Come check out Spin of Fate. If you want to grab a copy of Spin of Fate, they will be there. I cannot wait for you all to experience this book. It's, again, so near and dear to my heart. It's so special to me, and I hope you will love it as much as I do. And the author's thoughts on it, going back over what like inspired the book, really just like enriched the reading experience even more for me. I hope you love it and enjoy the video. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Today we have my first ever author interview, which is super exciting. We are interviewing A.A.Vora, who is the author of Spin of Fate, which you all know that I read last year and absolutely fell in love with. Oh, I actually have a copy. Oh, I get to hold up a copy. I absolutely loved this book, so I'm very excited to be interviewing A.A.Vora today, along with my best friend, Lou is here.
All right. Hello. I do have a YouTube channel. I am a lawyer in Brazil, and I also am currently a PhD candidate in law as well. Generally, I'm just a dumbass, but sometimes I do smart things. That's me.
Hi, so I'm A.A.Vora. My full name is Ambika Nagino. I'm an Indian-Japanese author. I live in Tokyo, and yeah, my debut novel, Spin of Fate, comes out on May 7th. So excited to talk about that.
I'm so excited to talk about this. This was one of my favorite reads of last year. I told Lou how much I loved it while I was reading it. I was telling my husband about it because he is a big fan of the show Naruto, and we've like passed that on to our oldest kid. And I know Lou is also a fan of Naruto. So that was our first question that we wanted to ask was, can you talk about being inspired by Naruto to write this book, and what other inspirations you had behind writing it?
Okay, yeah. I want to start off saying that like much of the inspiration, especially for the themes in the magic system, actually came from karma yoga, which is the theory of karma. So to provide like a very quick disclaimer, this is a very nuanced concept, and I have read and researched about it, but I am by no means an expert. My mom introduced it to me when I was a kid, and she read the Bhagavad Gita where it first appears, and it's like fascinated me ever since. And to provide like an oversimplified explanation, it's basically like a causative principle where a person's actions and intentions determine their future, including future birth. So the magic system, the Thematic system in Spin of Fate, is loosely inspired by this, with several twists for creative purposes. So essentially, you have the four realms, which are inspired a bit by like the lokas. So you have these four realms in Spin of Fate where you can kind of ascend or descend based on the cumulative morality of your actions, which affects the spin of your soul. So it's like, be a good person, do nice things, you ascend, be an asshole, you descend. So like, while this sounds good in theory, you discover that it's complicated by a lot of external factors that make including the magic, that make ascension a lot harder than it sounds. Also, the concepts of like rebirth and reincarnation, which are kind of vital for the system to function, have been eradicated because everyone's immortal. So yeah, the overall magic system and like the themes derive from karma, but with a twist.
Inspired by the law of karma is, I don't think that's something that we've ever seen in a at least not in any YA fantasy that I have heard of before. I think that some things have been sort of compared to Naruto, but certainly not, Naruto, and also inspired by the law of karma. So that's fascinating and very new, and that's part of what I loved about it, was that this is very much having conversations that I have not seen had before in book. The inspiration
behind my husband, Uchiha Itachi. But yeah, no, that's Itachi. But
I have such bad eyesight that I snapped at it and I was like, is that Orochimaru? No, it's not.
No,
I'm so sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I actually like he's one of my favorite villains. So there you go. But yeah.
Yeah,
so
he's a really good villain.
Oh wait, who's your favorite Naruto character, Lou?
Ooh, so I had an answer for that when I was 12, and I have a different one at age 28. Because when I was 12, I really liked Hinata, but like at age 28, Sakura is like, it's very understandable.
Because
Sophia wants to be known that her favorite Naruto character is the MILF.
Yes.
Tsunade.
Yes.
Kushina. Oh, Tsunade.
I love the MILF.
The MILF, yeah. The thing is, I love Naruto so much. It's been like an inspiration for my book and also like my life in general. So like the idea of elemental magic in Spin of Fate comes from Naruto. The Chitrons, like they kind of function a bit like Chakra from Naruto. And then also you have like the dynamics of this main trio, like boy, boy, girl, who like don't always see eye to eye and like don't get along in the beginning, but eventually they develop like this, you know, respect and like mutual acknowledgement and like almost a grudging sort of friendship. So that was very Team 7 inspired. And then I'm looking at my bookshelf. So the Golden Compass, definitely I took inspiration from in terms of like, I love how Philip Pullman describes dust as like a conscious particle. So that's what kind of gave me the idea of like Chitrons as conscious particles, also like channeling in Wheel of Time. There's a very interesting anime called Psychopaths where you have something called the crime coefficient. So it's like this like artificial intelligence that's like based on the chemicals in a person's brain and their thought patterns. It kind of preemptively punishes you based on like crimes that you might commit. So it's kind of interesting because it's this idea of like a non-human, like all-knowing like entity that's kind of judging you. So that was also kind of an inspiration for the magic.
I'll have to see if my husband has watched that because that sounds really good.
No, I was gonna say, because I have been asked this like about this the Avatar series, Avatar The Last Airbender. So I haven't actually seen it, but I did some research and it seems the creators were also inspired by Indian philosophy and they read the Bhagavad Gita, which I think is really cool. I wasn't inspired by Avatar, but we share an inspiration. So I think that like if there might actually be overlap that I'm unaware of. And it was really cool because like seeing my book marketed to this made me like discover this series. So like I'm just waiting for like my baby to get a bit older and like I'm quite excited to like watch it with her because I think I'm probably gonna enjoy it. So
that's actually how I feel about your book now with my kid loving Naruto. I'm waiting for my kid to get like a little bit older so that he can read Spin of Fate because I think he's gonna love it knowing what he knows about Naruto. I have not watched Avatar The Last Airbender either, so I was not able to make that comparison, but I have watched a little bit of Naruto, so I did see like, you know, some parallels there. But definitely I really loved what you said about like Philip Pullman and his writing of Dust. That I definitely saw. I love the Golden Compass. And I also feel like what Philip Pullman was trying to do with the conversation on religion as an institution is very similar to what you're doing in Spin of Fate. Despite you talking about like you're not talking about the Catholic Church or, you know, the evangelical church, but how does it feel like knowing that similar conversations are being had as, you know, we're with Philip Pullman's work, and even people who are like myself who grew up evangelical can see themselves reflected in your characters despite, you know, you not being inspired by the religion I grew up with.
Sorry, watching your review, that was one of the things that really shocked me, but in a very pleasant way, because I don't have much of knowledge about, you know, Christianity and like Fundi. Like I actually learned that from when I heard you talking about it. I wrote Aranel based on, you know, because I did grow up in India, which is a country which has faced a lot of religious violence. And again, I want to make it clear that, I mean, the Golden Compass is a criticism of Christianity, I think, in many ways. Like Spin of Fate is not meant to be prescribing any religion, nor is it meant to be criticizing or advocating against any religion. I just want to make that clear. It's more about this idea where religions are distorted and twisted and misinterpreted, like the texts, to brainwash people. And again, like the character of Aranel, he is a boy who has been brainwashed from a very young age. And I wrote that again, you know, growing up in Bombay, like there were like the 26/11 terrorist attacks, like there is so much, you know, communal violence happening sometimes between, again, Hindus and Muslims. And I'm of the opinion that all of these religions at their root are actually beautiful and peaceful things. It's just, you know, the way they're being distorted to brainwash and control people. And then seeing that like there's a lot of, you know, people from like Christianity who actually are having maybe a similar experience in like in a different sense, and that they're able to get something from my book was like, it's like, it was not the thing that I intended specifically, but I think when I think about my overall intentions for the book, I'm just really touched that it was able to do that. So yeah, I'm glad that, you know, that there have been some like questions I've gotten that like, is it really appropriate to discuss religion to kids? But I think that, you know, if you look at the world and what's happening right now, so many, religion is the root of so much, you know, anger and hatred when it really shouldn't be. And that makes me sad. So I hope hope that people can read this and get something out of it.
I think that your work is, I don't even think that it does criticize religion or teaches kids about religion. It more teaches kids about what happens when people who are religious want to have other people live a certain way. So I think your book is very age appropriate for the intended audience. But that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask was, who did you write this for and what were you hoping that they would take away from it?
Oh, that's actually challenging because so initially, I should preface this saying that when I first conceptualized and wrote it, it was for adult fantasy, but I got advice early on, like years before I landed my agent, to write it as YA because the market had more opportunities for, writers like me. So I ended up rewriting a lot of it. So like, for instance, Aranel was this centuries old bigot in like the first version. And then I had to make him like, a kid who's being brainwashed. So I did rewrite a lot of it, but basing my answer on Spin of Fate in its current state, I would say that I wrote it for teenage me. That's like a very specific sort of kid. And I think I struggled because while writing it, I wanted it to resonate with a wider audience than just teenage me. And the reason I struggled was because the target age range in YA is 12 to 18, which is so huge, developmentally when you look at children, like in terms of their attention span, how quickly do they absorb information? How many times do they need it repeated to them? How much nuance can they understand? Like how much context and like foreshadowing can they pick up on? Like even within just like a 12-year-old range, there's like just such a big, a gap, like not a gap, but like there's such a big range there. So I think it was really a struggle identifying like the specific audience. But then again, like thinking back to myself when I was a teenager, like what did I enjoy? So I loved diving into super detailed worlds like The Silmarillion, The Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time. I also loved manga and anime, a lot of like shonen, which is YA in Japan, with like action and fighting and training arcs and like super dramatic characters who can be a bit like silly at times. I had just started questioning the world around me in terms of, ethics and morality. And I was doing like a lot of debate and Model United Nations. So it was a lot of like, why do bad things happen to good people? Like, why does conflict exist? And then I also enjoyed like romance to an extent, but not too much, because I like later realized that I'm someone who's like demi-romantic, but also on the asexual spectrum. So like I liked it when there was like just enough romance to like ship two characters together. But I also liked like not knowing what's going to happen and who's going to end up together, because I enjoyed like that will they, won't they dynamic. So like again, like shonen
Can I
manga,
just
like
say
Naruto.
that Naruto has such a huge amount of will they, won't they, that, I've been following Naruto since I was a little kid. And in the moment where Naruto and Hinata kiss for the first time after, I don't know how many, it was like teenage me just had like a dream fulfilled or something like that. And I think it's like that. Yeah, like it's just an interesting aspect of romance that we don't usually read. It's not even slow burn, because I feel like slow burn is when you have like two characters who are mutually aware of each other and interested in each other, and that just slowly grows throughout a story. But I think what's interesting, and tying it back a little to when you talked about the age range, the slow burn at this age is not necessarily because those two people are taking so long. It's because those people are becoming people at the same time that they are hopelessly in love with someone. And that is just like provides such an interesting character dynamic, I feel, as you're following those characters as they grow, and then they become sort of like who they are as a person sort of becomes intrinsically tied to that other person, which is incredibly romantic in itself. I'm sorry for ranting. It's just that it was such a good payoff in situations such as these.
Yeah. And like the thing is, I hesitate so I think that I'm writing a slow burn here, but like I hesitate marketing it as that, because I do feel like manga are actually often, like shonen manga are criticized for their romance being like underdeveloped. But again, for me, like that's kind of the perfect pacing. Like I felt so vindicated after all these years. Like Sasuke, like he made like Sakura like a ring, and he was like being super romantic, and I was like, finally, like it took you like 15 years, but finally. But like again, like I think by Western standards, this is like so like snail's pace that like because book one, to me, it's like they've known each other for 4 months, so they're like maybe starting to like develop crushes, but like they're still in denial, and like that's it. And like also sometimes you might like a person, but then you realize that, oh wow, like this person is not for me after all. So I think that's what I've like tried to put in. But yeah, I would prefer saying that there is like limited to no romance, just because I feel like if I start saying slow burn, it's gonna like set up expectations that people will be disappointed by. So
I think that comparing it to how the relationships in Naruto progress is spot on, because we do a lot of individual building in Naruto that we're also doing here in Spin of Fate, where I don't know who's going to end up with who. I could make a guess, but I don't know for sure. But what I like is that either way, I'm happy because I've spent time with each individual character, all three of them, and I know them. Whereas like when we talk about like Western stories now, we are doing a lot of that. You go in, you immediately know who the couple is going to be, and they're doing a will they, won't they for all of 2 chapters, and the payoff is not there. And I really appreciated that we're not doing that here. We are building these unique individual people in a way that is so important, and then the relationship stuff will be more satisfying because you'll be rooting for them the whole time and you'll know them individually as people.
Yeah, and just tying that off with what you just said, I think like you wouldn't say Naruto is something about romance. Like that's not the point of Naruto, but there is romance and the possibility of romance, and that actually influences so many of the choices taken throughout the story. But it's definitely not, it's not the focus, it's a part of it. And I feel like that again also offers a very interesting counterpoint with the way that we're having Western authors in its majority do books about romances, like incredibly falling into like the no romance, no nothing, etc., pure high fantasy book. And then we have the fantasy romance books, which are all about the romance, and then sometimes you have a plot, but that is not guaranteed. And I think it's interesting to have romance to be, or either the possibility of, to be something that allows for the building of those specific characters. That is a question that I actually want to ask you. Like, how often do you compare, or how often did you compare your writing style and the things that you were incorporating into your writing, how that compared to Western audiences? And did you think that that was something that would be a liability for you? Or was this something that you try to work as something that would be marketable and would work for a traditional publishing style?
So I love that question actually, because so to like start this off, there's this book by an author called Erin Mayer. It's called The Culture Map. I would kind of recommend it to anyone who works in like a multicultural environment, but it talks about how like different cultures have different communication styles. So a lot of Eastern cultures like Japan, even India as a Southern culture, are a bit more what you would call high context. So what you mean by that is that a lot of things are left unsaid and ambiguous, and there's a lot of reading between the lines. And this works like when you're like, let's say a Japanese author writing for a Japanese audience, because everyone has grown up in the same cultural context. So these ideas can still be conveyed. When you look at countries like America, it's a lot more diverse than Japan, because there's just people from all over the world bringing in their different cultures. And because of this, the way the communication style has evolved in America is to be more what you would call low context. So you do tend to be, I think, Americans compared to Japanese people in general are a little bit more straightforward. I think this also kind of translates into how we tell stories, because whenever there's like a multicultural aspect, it's usually like the high context cultures which have to kind of bring down the context so that it can be understood by a low context. So when writing this, especially because a lot of the inspirations were like from concepts that were from Asia, or like, you know, like the idea of reincarnation, an Asian kid, like a Japanese or an Indian kid will probably just kind of know what that is. But maybe an American, 12-year-old might not know what that is. So it does require a bit more explanation. It's like, it's weird because there's like 2 layers here. The first is like you're exploring cultural contexts that might not, like cultural ideas that might not be known to the West. So you're like so scared of it being like misinterpreted or misconstrued that you like kind of try to explain yourself a bit more. Like I would have written this so differently if it was for like a Japanese or an Indian audience. So that's like the first layer. And then the second layer is coming to just the way you like phrase your words. You do tend to, I think, remove nuance when you're writing as an Asian author, sometimes for Western audiences. And then especially like, and I really struggled with this idea of nuance when I was like doing developmental edits. And I was talking to like my friend who works in a child psych developmental lab and like reading some reports. And 8 to 10 years is generally when a kid starts to like, understand and question like, nuance and like ethical things and moral things. So then positioning this book to like a 12-year-old reader, I still want to make it so that the 12-year-old can understand the moral stakes without it being too ambiguous and too cloudy. But then the struggle is I also want to appeal to adult readers who would then find that a bit too obvious, or like even like an 18-year-old would find it too obvious. So there's like this constant trade-off just because of, I think, the concepts and because of the different cultures that I'm dealing with, which also, again, it came into like magic system because it's like, I was told during edits that like, oh, kids nowadays, because of all the overstimulation, they have like shorter attention spans than they once did. So like, maybe I'm just old. I don't know. I did end up writing a book that was a bit slower paced by YA standards. So again, that was like a trade-off. It was like, do I want to like if I quicken the pace, I like lose a lot of the introspective stuff that I wanted and like a lot of the world building. So it's again, there's like a cultural difference sense, because sometimes I think in Japan you're used to things that are slightly like slower paced. I think then like they do take more time to like develop. They get a bit more introspective, you know, and they get a bit like less action focused. So that was a struggle. Also, like when it came to like world building and magic system, I definitely pushed back on cutting down too much, because I'm kind of the opinion that we tend to underestimate what kids are capable of learning. So there was like a recent study about how kids who played Pokemon in their youth, their brain actually developed like differently because they had to memorize all these names, and they were doing it at like 5 or 6 years old. For me, like simplifying like world building and magic system is not something that I necessarily agree with. And again, because manga and anime, they go so detailed into magic system, and I think that like middle and high schoolers, their brains are like capable of understanding this. Like they're learning like math and like I knew more math and science as a kid than I do now. Yeah, I mean, this just, sorry, I like rambled a bit, but it just comes down to like identifying the target audience and trying to shape this in a way that it would be, you know, palatable for them was definitely like a huge struggle. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better to like try to appeal to like a specific type of reader than trying to like be like holistic. But my hope is that there are kids who enjoy the things that I enjoyed and that they will enjoy my book. And even if, you know, they don't care about certain aspects, like I didn't care about the religious aspects of his Dark Materials when I first read it. All I cared about was like Lyra and like the polar bears. So I hope that like different readers can maybe like take different parts of it that they like. And, you know, you could skim on like the Chitonic magic system if you don't like it. You could still find like, you know, fight scenes that are more to your liking. So that was kind of what I was aiming for.
Very interesting answer. And while you were talking about the different types of straightforwardness in cultures, it's a bit of a horseshoe theory in the end, because you have Americans at the middle being like super direct, and then the Japanese being like a lot of things are left unsaid, and then very close on the other side in completely different ways you have Brazilians who also don't say what they think ever. There's like this running joke that Brazilians never say no. Like if you ask them a question, they will like phrase it in a way that doesn't sound like a negative. And so it's just interesting to me to see those different aspects of different cultures that still converse to each other. The reason why I'm saying this, because you were talking about the concept of incarnation and that American kids might not be wholly familiar with that. But again, because of African inspiration, Brazilians always believe in incarnation, and the majority of Brazilians will, and are very familiar with the concept despite not being part of those cultures. And so I feel like there's a bigger bite to multiculturalism in this aspect, and maybe you definitely did not write this with the mind that Brazilian kids might also be familiar and with the concept of incarnation. But I think it just shows just how possible it is for people of different cultures to connect with the culture that is so different from their own. And it bears really the bones of what makes culture and how people can connect in that sense. And I think that this is one of the reasons why while I was active on YouTube, I was always down on like, we need to publish more diverse books, and we need more diversity, not just diversity within the context of the United States, which is something that I got a lot of hate for saying, but I feel like it's important to say. Not just diversity within the United States, but diversity in where those stories are being told from. Because a Japanese Indian woman who was raised in the United States has a very different perspective and way of telling stories that was brought up in another context. And I can say the exact same thing of Latino people, just how different it is when a story is from the point of view of a person of that ethnicity living in the United States rather than a person of that ethnicity living in Latin America. And I feel like sometimes publishing as a whole sort of undermines how powerful that diversity is, which was part of the reason why I agreed with Rachel that I really wanted to be on this, is because I feel like it really highlights just how important it is for us to hear stories from other perspectives as well. Again, I'm ranting again. I was just very happy with the whole thing.
So since your world building is so extensive, this is a hard magic system as opposed to a soft. How did you stay organized with all of this? Because it is pretty extensive. I don't know how you stayed on top of all of this. Do you have like a chart? Is it color coordinated?
So this is going to be like a really drab and like uninspired thing to say. But basically, before I even got my deal, I had this multi-tab monstrosity of an Excel sheet that had like everything plotted out in detail from like a prequel to like book 3. So So I don't actually have a deal for the prequel, but I'm hoping I get one. We'll see. But yeah, so like in terms of like character arcs and like a glossary of all the places, like a history, a timeline of dates, and like the maps that I had drawn. So I actually showed that to my publisher, and it's what they were going to give me a duology. And then they saw that and they were like, I was like, I need a trilogy to tell the story. Like, because I had like the whole story, like the whole framework like lined out. So they were like, okay, you get a trilogy. So thank you, Penguin, for making that happen. And like the thing is, it's funny about world building because a lot of the world building and magic system actually never made it to the page for Spin of Fate, because when writing YA, there is some pressure to like cut down on world building and simplify magic to like, you know, move the pace to kind of make the pace quicker. And it's already kind of slower for YA, though it's like, I think fast for like adult standards. But yeah, so like a lot of this stuff that I did will probably never see the light of the day, which makes me kind of sad. But book 2 is a jump up in terms of like world building. But yeah, so because of this, I did like I found a workaround because I wanted like super long appendices, but like that wasn't possible. So what I did was I made and designed a series website that has a lot of the bonus content. So kind of like a Wikipedia page or like a wiki almost. So like if you'd like to explore it like after reading the book or even before, you can learn more about the world. There's like a lot of art of like the beasts and the characters that I've done, my versions of the map, a lot of hints and like Easter eggs for like books 2, 3, and the prequel. So like, I don't know, I just thought that like hopefully this would be a fun thing for readers who want to discover more without it bogging down the reading experience of like people who just don't want all of that crap in like the actual book.
I want it. I want the extras.
So yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, like if I had it my way, I would include all of this in the book, but like I'm still like a new debut author, so I have to play by like certain rules. And my publisher did let me break some rules. So again, I'm like you know, about the hard magic system and stuff. So I am grateful for that. So yeah.
I did not know that you created an entire wiki, basically. That's incredible. That's an incredible amount of work.
Yeah, it was fun because I have like some very basic like software design experience. So I just like went for it. I think I enjoyed having like one space where like I'm in full control of like everything. So it's just, yeah, I'm a bit like obsessive when it comes to like specifics about my book. So that was fun. Oh, actually hard magic, just like really quickly, I wanted to, because I don't know if like everyone is super, I mean, a lot of readers are super familiar, but like, so when we say hard magic, what we mean is it's one where the magic system has specific rules and limitations. And oftentimes it's like the character's understanding of those rules and limitation that drive the plot. So these can get like fairly scientific. So like Brandon Sanderson, he's the king of hard magic. A lot of like manga and games actually. So like Pokemon is an example. You have like specific numbers and effects attached to Pokemon attacks. Hard magic is not something that I think is super common in YA. I think the magic does tend to be a little bit more like nebulous and mysterious. Because like with hard magic, you're playing with a science and you're like making up like fictitious rules for like fictitious particles and how they interact with your environment. So like for me, how I kind of organized it and like how I looked at it was what are like the scientific and mathematical concepts that like middle and high schoolers are learning about. So you have like a lot of basic algebra, you know, when you're talking about like the spin of your soul and the limits, you know, positive and negative. And then you also have like some thermodynamics in terms of like, oh, how the dark energy flows from like a net high concentration to like a net low concentration. So a lot of the inspiration really was like what I learned in science class when I was in middle and high school. And I hope that like, again, it is a hard magic system, but since the concepts are things that kids would be fairly familiar with, I hope that it can be a fun thing where they can relate it back and be like, oh, like I kind of learned about something similar in school. So yeah, that was just a bit more about the magic system side of things.
I do feel like it's a hard magic system that is still accessible for its target audience. So I think that that's a good point where it's like, yes, this is a hard magic system. However, it's not hard to understand. It is still accessible for the target audience in that they are going to see, you know, things that they learn in school in the magic system. And yeah, definitely be able to tie that back. I failed algebra. So I was, I found some things to be like a little bit not hard to understand, but things I would have to read twice just because even as an adult, I am not that intelligent. But I think that this is so much like for the nerds. Like this was written for the nerdy kids who love Naruto, enjoy like these fantastical worlds where they can really like immerse them. It's very immersive. The hard magic system, the world building, it's very good. It's very immersive. You really do feel like you're there. And part of that is because both like the different planes of existence that we're on were made so distinctly. You did such a good job at that. I mean, it was just so immersive no matter where we were. Yeah, I think you really exceeded my expectations as far as world building, which, you know, part of my complaint in so many books that I read is like, I don't feel like I am there. And in this, I felt that way. I felt like I was there. So knocked it out of the park.
Thank you. World building was always, I wouldn't say like a priority, but I tend to be someone who loves kind of world first and then character. Which is why sometimes I wonder if like I have made the characters too unlikable or like morally ambiguous to serve as like good role models for the kids. Because like you have Aranel, who's like a brainwashed kid who needs to deprogram, and like, obviously like some readers will relate to that, but like I feel for a lot of readers it's going to be like so out there that they're like, what is with this spoiled brat? You know, he's been brainwashed for years, so he needs like time to improve. And like book 1, again, it's like 4 months, which to me is not enough time for him. So like his character arc, like really book 2 and book 3 is how I've planned his arc. And then same for Aina, like she goes through a lot of trauma in book 1. So like book 2, she's just gonna be like dealing with that trauma. She's not gonna be like a super strong female character, because I feel like she needs time to process. But the thing is, like, what I'm kind of not regretting, but I'm wondering is that because in YA you do kind of want to see a bit faster character growth, because at the end of a book you do want a kid to look at someone as a role model. And I don't really know that I've done that yet. Like hopefully by the end of book 3 they will be role models, but like they do have a lot of like struggling and growing and like making bad decisions left before they reach that point. And they do have like Aina has a downward trajectory coming. So yeah, I sometimes worry about like how are kids going to relate to that, or like how are they going to, but yeah, we'll see.
I think that we underestimate the kids and what they actually want to see in books, because I don't think that kids really want to see a role model so much as they do want to see themselves reflected in books. And if you ask any kid, they themselves don't feel like a role model. They feel like a kid. They feel like a person. And don't really want to be boiled down to like the idea of a role model. And I feel like what is so great about at least what we're seeing in book 1 is that these kids feel like fully realized kids, and they reflect the surroundings that they live in, the relationships that they grew up in. So kids won't see themselves as role models, but they will see themselves reflected and see that, you know, these kids, despite going through certain things, are still alive, still able to make friends, and still important. And I think that is really what matters.
Yeah, thank you. That's true, because again, they do, you know, they will develop agency, but like honestly book 1 they spend most of their books being manipulated by adults, and book 2 is really when they start to break out of their shells and like think for themselves. But I do wonder, like a lot of times in YA I think you do want to see that like a bit sooner. So yeah, I mean, again, it's like the pacing for like the character arcs and everything is so slow that sometimes I wonder like, who have I written this for? But hopefully there will be kids who are maybe, you know, have tastes that are similar to mine who can relate to it. So yeah, we'll see.
I think there are, and I think that this is a book that was not written for the kids who are, I mean, there's so much of YA fantasy right now is written to be like very similar. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I feel like I worry about the kids who get lost in that conversation, the kids who don't find stories that they see themselves in. And I think that this is one of those stories that is written for those kids who are not seeing themselves reflected in so much of YA fantasy these days. So I think that it's a very important book for that intended audience. We talked about like who this is for, and part of that is them, and what did you want them to take away from it. We talked about that. What kind of conversation specifically, so like what kind of theme were you hoping to create a conversation with this work?
Yeah, as you've seen, this is like a very thematically heavy book. I love books that are heavy on themes, like Death Note, like Babel is an example that like I loved it. So I understand that
I loved it.
It was so good. Like
so
all
good.
the themes were brilliant. This is a book that is heavy on themes. And so there's a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, and it says that life is a moral battleground. And this is explored more in book 2, but it's this idea that yes, there are conflicts happening around you in the world. There's war, but I think the ultimate conflict and the war between good and evil is within yourself, and it's within your soul. And every action you choose is pushing you one way or another. And again, I realize this sounds a bit religious, so I want to make it very clear that this book is not meant to prescribe any particular religion. It's more of the idea that like whether or not you're religious or atheist or agnostic, it's your choices that matter. Even if you don't realize it, your actions are going to come back, and they're either going to come, haunt you one day, or they're going to yield some good results. We do see characters in Spin of Fate who do things, terrible things, unintentionally or not. And we are going to see in future books like how that plays out for them, because one of the things about karma is that the consequences are not always immediate. Down the line, you will see them kind of facing their karma, so to speak. There are also, of course, the themes that I already spoke about how religion is kind of misinterpreted and misconstrued. The idea about whether means justify an end, nurture versus nature when it comes to good and evil, the idea of systematic oppression, and how sometimes even like charity, when it's it's well-intentioned, can have harmful effects on the people that you're trying to uplift. There is a lot that I tried to put in there. I can't say how effectively I did it, but my hope is that the resolution of book one itself is open-ended enough that I want readers to be like conflicted about the ending and the characters. Like I want them to wonder, like, was this person right? Or like, were they justified? Or do they just like deserve a slap in the face? Which also may not be mutually exclusive, but like, you know, if it can spark that kind of debate, spark that kind of like annoyance or even discomfort towards certain characters, I think I would be happy. So
I think you handled, especially, I didn't even think to talk about that in my review when I talked about what I thought was going on thematically here, but like the unintended consequences of like, sure, you're trying to be charitable, but here's the unintended consequences of that. Like, again, you were not writing about evangelicalism, but evangelicalism is, there's a lot of that in evangelical culture. And I think that that's such an important conversation that, number one, we don't tend to have in books. And if we do, we're not doing it in a nuanced way, which I feel like your book does. And also we're not writing it in a way that can be understood by a young adult audience, which I feel like this book did. So I think you did a great job with that thematically. I want to ask what your favorite scene is, or what a scene was that was particularly hard for you to write.
Okay. So my favorite scene is actually, it's a fairly introspective one. So it's, without spoiling too much, the first chapter of part 2, when Aranel, he has a conversation with another character about Thoranic law, which is this, you know, all judging magic system that determines your morality and where you belong. And they have a conversation in the hot springs about like the nature of good and evil. It's a bit philosophical. There's like a metaphor with a turtle. And it's really funny because this was a scene that I received feedback to cut, and I kind of fought for it. And eventually it was streamlined considerably from what I wrote, because I could have rambled on about that conversation for like pages, but I had to cut it. But again, I'm thankful that my editor did let me keep it, and like he really understood the importance of it, because to me, like that scene was the crux of the book. And it was like, this is why I'm writing this book. Like all the action and stuff is great, but like I need the scene. So yeah, if you read it, it's the hot spring scene with the turtle metaphor. So that was, I think, my favorite. In terms of the hardest, so emotionally, and I think like, because I also teared up like watching your review, but it was a lot of the scenes with Aina's mother. There's one scene at the end which has her talking about her past. And okay, so this is a bit of a trigger warning because I'm about to talk about some not so pleasant pregnancy stuff. So maybe like fast forward a minute if you don't want to hear that. I had a pretty difficult pregnancy journey. So I had like severe endometriosis, like miscarriages, surgery. We had to do IVF. It was miserable. And I developed really severe like postpartum anxiety and depression. So after I gave birth to my daughter the first night, I think it was just, I was envisioning all these terrible things happening to her, and I was just sobbing in my bed, and I was praying. And I was praying to God that, you know, whatever pain or sickness that is going to come to my daughter, let it come to me. And any suffering she is to face, like just let me face it in her stead. And this goes very against like the idea of karma, because karma is like you reap what you sow in a way. But I was like praying that like, please, just like nothing bad for her. Like I don't care like how much she hates me or whatever, but like just I will take all of that. And this was something that and I wrote this like to a friend, like I was texting, and then I wrote this scene about like Aina's mother, because I was line editing basically like the day I came out of the hospital. So I kind of like picked up those sentences like verbatim and just like shoved them into the manuscript, because I think that was the point where like at a mother I was just at like my lowest. So it was like hard for me to write, but also very cathartic. And yeah, I don't know, I think postpartum depression does funny things to your brain, but in a weird way for me, like that stress, and like it's also served as like an inspiration. So yeah, that was my hard scene.
Oh my gosh, writing right after the hospital. That's one of the most vulnerable times. I mean, after my first, I was okay, but after my second, oh my God, that's the most depressed and anxious I've ever been. I mean, honestly, it makes sense. It really jumped off the page, those scenes. So it makes a lot of sense that like those real life emotions were written into the book and came out in such an organic and real and natural way, because that's, I can see it. I experienced it, so I can see it.
Yeah. And actually, on the note of like endometriosis and like hormones, it was funny because so Aina's whole thing about not being able to do this magic that comes so naturally to people, that whole idea stemmed from like me basically not being able, like giving birth and getting pregnant for me was so hard. And like I would like look at like people around me and think that like, why is it like this ability to give birth? It's like a human right almost of sorts, and like people are doing it so easily, and like why can't I? Like why have I been denied this thing that everyone can do so easily? And it's such a struggle for me. And that's what kind of manifested in like Aina's magic. She has like kind of a defect, a deformity. in her body, which was like representative maybe of my endometriosis. Like, I don't know, but it's like this thing that like comes so naturally for people. She struggles with it. So that's kind of where like, again, like postpartum played a role in like inspiring a part of like the magic and a part of the character in this book. But yeah, so.
No, like I'm actually tearing up because I went through I went through secondary infertility where I had a rough time getting pregnant with my first, and then I had my first kid, and then I went through secondary infertility where I got pregnant back to back and had back to back miscarriages. I completely understand. I remember being like, well, everybody else is fine. Like everybody else seems to be like functioning properly, and I feel like I am defective. Like there's something wrong here, and that's so frustrating because I feel like I have done everything right. There's no reason why this should be happening. And so like I never made that connection with Ina, but that makes so much sense, and that just honestly like makes me want to hug the book. It's like so like dear to my heart because it's so difficult to explain that to anybody who hasn't been through it. Oh no, not me tearing up on camera.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think like teenagers would necessarily derive that, but again, it's one of those things where I feel like if you're an adult, maybe you can get something different from this. And this was basically adult me trying to reconcile the fact that I was struggling with getting pregnant. That's what that was. So yeah.
I think that's beautiful. And even if kids can't relate to it, I think that them being able to have sort of like a window into that conversation of what that feels like. And even if it's not like them understanding it through the lens of pregnancy, but them having a disability, it's a way that we can, you know, teach them empathy and also make them feel as if they are seen. So I think that that's so important, and the added context just makes me like the book more. Okay, so last question. Any last words to listeners, and where and how can they buy your book if they are interested?
So one thing I should say, like before I get to, so this is just me being like ungrateful and melodramatic, but there was a misprint in my hardcovers and I was devastated and I cried. And basically what happened was, and again, I don't blame my publisher or production because these things happen more often than not. I'm just being melodramatic. But after I like last saw and approved the text, there were some like errors that somehow snuck in. So there was like a typo and a stylistic change, which like whatever, I'll get over those. But one thing that happened was that a couple sentences were deleted from a pretty crucial action scene. And this like made me really upset because it just ends up muddling the action. And like, it's actually fine in the arc, but in the final copy, yeah, it does end up like muddling the action a bit. Like there is a little bit of discontinuity where it's like a reader later on recalls the scene and it's like, wait, but that's different. It also confuses a bit of the magic system because you have like these rules about like where characters can be, and suddenly it's like this character is here, why is she there? But yeah, it's something that like 99% of readers probably won't notice or care, but it's kind of like breaking my heart. And I just feel like I need to be transparent and like tell people that yes, there are these printing errors. I'm really sorry. I did everything in my power to have them fixed, but for the first edition hardcovers, they are going to be there. And it's put like a big damper on me. Like I'm sure there's like a learning lesson for me somewhere to stop being so obsessive, but I haven't learned it yet. So I'm still like at my bitter phase. But yeah, so yeah, if we get a second printing, they'll be fixed, but I'm not too optimistic because, you know, we need to sell a lot of copies for that to happen. And like most books don't get second printings. So most likely if you order the hardcover, you will have this mistake. I'm really sorry, but I have posted a clarification on my blog so that like after you read the scene, you can like check what it was supposed to read like. I don't think it's going to detract too much from the overall experience. I feel the need to tell people that this is there. So yeah, that was one thing. And then I guess so Spin of Fate is releasing on May 7th in the US and Canada. It will be available internationally in some countries. It will be available in some bookstores and libraries, probably not all. Barnes and Noble will have it. And I feel awkward saying this, but as a debut author, it would be nice to have, you know, decent sales, because I feel like decent pre-orders and sales can signal to publishers that a book is worth the investment, and it can open up opportunities for, you know, new authors in terms of like publicity and other aspects. So all of that is to say that if this appeals to you, if Rachel's review appeals to you, this book might be worth your time. And if you can afford it, it would really mean a lot if you could consider pre-ordering the book or buying it when it's out on May 7th. I have pre-order links in my Instagram bio. So my handle is A.A.Vora. There's also a 50% sale going on right now. So all that information is there so you can buy it or ask your library to buy it. There's also a fairly detailed marketing summary about this book on my Instagram. So I've tried to be really transparent there in terms of, you know, what you can expect. So like, feel free to check that out before deciding like whether this is worth your money. Because, you know, it may be for you, it may be not, it may not be. So yeah, I think that's kind of just about pre-orders. And I mean, thank you so much for like watching and listening. Thank you like Rachel and Lou and and like just BookTube for giving me this like incredible opportunity, because like it's been really hard living in Japan to like get word out about my book, and like unfortunately I don't have any launch events planned, so it's really nice to have this like kind of virtual launch kind of thing happening. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm so excited for this book to come out and be able to talk about it with more people. There is an audiobook coming out, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
there will
awesome.
be an audiobook.
Awesome. So that'll make it even more accessible. So hopefully I can chat with people about the audiobook. I'm excited to get the audiobook.
I don't know if I'm allowed to relate the narrator yet, but yeah, I'll post. It's exciting. We got someone where it was one of those things where like you're so shocked, and it's like seriously, like that person is narrating my book. So yeah, I'll announce it later. I'm really excited.
Oh, that's so exciting. I'm very excited. I tend to like re-listen to audiobooks of books that I already enjoyed and loved. Actually, another book that I feel like is very similar to yours that I loved was Beasts of Prey by Ayanna Gray. And I re-listen to that audiobook sometimes at night, like when I'm trying to fall asleep. It's like a comfort audio. So I'm excited for your book so that it can also be on my like comfort audio roster.
Thank you.
Was the other thing I was and also if anybody is going to BookNet Fest, I am so excited to be able to say that I have copies coming with me of Spin of Fate to BookNet Fest, so you can grab a copy if you are coming to BookNet Fest. So yay! All right, thank you so much, Ambika, for being here and allowing me to interview you, my first ever author interview. I really appreciate you, and I can't wait for your book to come out. So
thank you so much again, and also to Lou. Thank you so much, Lou.
Yes, Lou,
let's
we
talk
love
about
you.
Naruto again soon.
All right, thank you everybody for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye. Hello, it's Trashcan Rachel, and I'm just here to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Brittany Bobitney, Cami, Choco's Waiting for Not All Men podcast, Chris, Dalton, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emperor's New Blues, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric, Ethel Go Lightly, Galaxy Bot, Jack, Jill, Jess, John E, Julie D, Kelly No K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Caitlin M, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Lily B, Max B, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Panoramic Demon, Peggy Lou, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Shiny, SMK, Spoopy, Steph B, 2 Orbit, White Raven 13, Zorvictia, and Chai Guy. Thank you all so much for being here and being a friend. And last but not least, before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Source Marxist patrons, and those are Alejandra, Alicia, Amanda, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ashley H, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blake Lemon Pants, Blythe, Bookish Bats, Bookish Brainrot, Bree, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Clementine, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Danielle, Darren, Deborah, Diet Goth, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorian, Dorothea, E.T. Cosgrove, Ebby, Emerald Dodge, Emily A, Emily L, Emma, Aaron, Ezra, Fiona, Gadarn, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, Haley G, Ilianaka, India Inks, JM Tennant, Jakenna, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jillian, Jojo Bookish, Kat, Catherine, Katie L, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, Kiara, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura, Lauren, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay M, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Luciri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Marcella, Marquita, Malara, Mentally Unwell, May, Molly, James, Natalie, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rivi, Ronnie, Rosie, Rowan, Sequoia, Sadie, Sakia Lume, Samantha, Sammy, Sarah, Sarah the Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, T. Delegati, Tay, Talia, 3 Old Dogs, Tiana, Toast, Trashcan Teddy, Tito Phoenix, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being a friend.